Hi everyone. I thought it'd be a good time to do a quick kind of video tour of this DIY veneer press. It's a vacuum press or a membrane press, depending on what you want to call it. I'm going to go through how I made it, some of the steps involved, kind of look at some of the materials. Now, this particular one was made originally as a proof of concept. I didn't intend it to be the actual final veneer press. It was kind of a bit of a practice run before I made my actual one. But actually, in the end, it worked really well, and I was busy, and I didn't want to spend more time making another one. And so this has ended up being kept and just used. Now we are going to make my friend one as well, and we'll take some of the things that we learned from making this one, and I'll try and film the actual process of making that, so we can upload a detailed video, sort of showing step by step how you made these veneer press. So this was made pretty much entirely out of workshop scrap. I mean, what's scrap to me might not be scrap to you, but some of it's like leftover boards from jobs and stuff. So really low cost. The only thing that you would absolutely need to purchase in order to make one really would be the vacuum pump itself. Now, I'm assuming if you're looking at making a vacuum press, you probably have some experience with a vacuum bag. You're not probably going to dive into making a press straight away. So if you've got a vacuum bag, you've probably got a pump for that, and it's likely to be big enough for the job. This is just a vacuum bag, pump that I've got. It's I think 8 cubic meters an hour, I think. So it's a relatively small pump. It's not a big commercial, industrial sized pump that you'd often see on a table. And I suspect that even the smallest ones, which are around kind of 4 cubic meters an hour, or even I think they're less common than the 8. So I suspect that would do the job as well, because this pulls a vacuum really quickly. It doesn't seem to sort of struggle to get the air, evacuate the air from the membrane. So I think if you've got a pump, chances are that pump's big enough. If not, you can buy them used. I mean, I got my pump used. I think I paid about 250 quid for it when I bought it. Just off eBay or Marketplace or something like that. But they come up, and I think new they're probably about 600 quid. So sort of go through that, give you an overview, and we'll have a little look. I'll just get this opened up, and we can have a look at sort of how it's made. Right, so the first thing you might notice here is that this has got like a top on it. So my workshop's quite small, and dedicating this much space to a press that I might use, I mean, sometimes I use it a lot, but it might not get used for a month if I'm not doing any veneered work. So I wanted something that I could at least use as a nice flat surface. I do a bit of gluing up on it. And it's just kind of handy as a kind of catch-all area, as you're machining parts right next to the plane, bits get put on it. So it's just handy to have a proper solid surface. So this on top is just a sheet of 25mm moisture-resistant MDF. It's some cheap cable wood stuff that I got back in 2020 when there was a shortage of good quality MDF in the UK. And you was really struggling to get like Finster and Medite. So I bought a load of cable wood for some jobs, and then Medite and Finster become available again. And so I started using them, and these sheets have just been kicking around. And that's the same material that I've done this top out of, and I've made this the actual kind of legs for it out of as well. So I'll take this off. There's just a couple of these kind of, whatever they're called, hook and loop type clips, like trigger clip things. It's fairly heavy because it is a 25mm sheet. And I've actually rebaited it out so that it doesn't sit as high, because I wanted to make sure it was lower than my spindle molder so it didn't get in the way, and it also centers it so it doesn't move. But let's just get this sheet out of the way, and then we can have a proper look. Right, now that that's off, you can see the membrane itself, and this membrane is a pond liner, like for a garden pond. Now this particular pond liner seems to be pretty good. It's an EPDM rubber. It's made by a company called Firestone, they're like the tyre people, and it is 1.01mm thick, which seems ludicrously specific, but that's what it says on the pack. So just if you're looking for the same thing, I'm guessing it will say it on the barcode of the one you're looking at as well. I got more than I needed, and I think it was maybe 60 quid's worth. And to be honest, I got it from a local aquarium centre. And I think probably most places are the same, where they buy it on a big roll and they end up with a lot of small offcuts. I mean, this isn't really big enough to do a pond with, because it's too narrow. So I think if you go to like your local place rather than buying it online, I bet there's some roll ends that they're probably willing to do a bit of a deal on, and you can probably get pretty cheap. So the way that I've done this top frame is, I think it's 4 inches, it's end up at 100mm. And I rebaited the top in 15mm. So I can get 85mm thick components in this press without having to remove that capping top, which was kind of important to me because I didn't have to take it off every time. So that's quite good. Most of the stuff I'm veneering is going to be like somewhere in the region of 20 to 30 millimeters thick. You know, you're normally panels, so you're kind of going to be around the inch mark. So generally speaking, I don't suspect I'm going to have to take it off. I don't actually think if I was doing big curve forms, this type of membrane would have enough stretch for doing really pronounced curves. I'm pretty confident I could do a curved draw front. I think I could probably do a curve maybe sort of with a peak of about 160, 170 millimeters, 6 or 7 inches maybe. I think bigger than that, it's probably not got quite enough stretch to it. And if you were looking at doing more of that kind of 3D formwork, bent lamination formwork, more extreme curves, larger kind of radiuses and stuff, you're probably worth looking at buying a proper silicon membrane. There's lots of suppliers. There seems to be a lot of suppliers out in Poland. If you're in the UK, there's a lot there's like some Polish companies that do them, which are quite reasonable. And I did consider it, but again, this was going to be a prototype, and so I got this because it was quick and easy. I mean, the aquatic centre is like 10 minutes from me, and I thought, well, I can go get that today and give it a go. So, so yeah, we've got that. So then the actual frame itself, as I say, it's made out of beech. I put a ton of clips on it, not knowing how many I would need. In reality, the vacuum almost holds it shut, so you don't really need the clips hardly at all, probably a couple just to get it started. But certainly I went overkill on it, but I kind of figured it's better to have them and not need them, and need them and not have them, so they're on there anyway. And then when we open this top up here, you can see the frame itself. Now, you can probably see a bit of a smattering and smear of silicone and stuff here. This was my first attempt at sealing it. So what I initially did was I cut a groove into the frame itself. I ran a continuous rubber seal all the way round, and that vacuumed onto the bed. That didn't work very well. And what I found was that I got a really good seal where the membrane was touching the base, but I got a very poor seal around there. Now, it might be that that's due to the porosity of the beech. It might be that the air is escaping through the beech, or it might just be that it doesn't seal particularly well. But either way, the next version, or the next iteration for this, was to create this small wall, and you can see I sealed all this up with some duct tape, the silver foil tape, just to make sure it's really well sealed, and have a rubber seal on top of that. And that rubber seal is contacting the membrane directly. So as it pulls down, you're getting a membrane to rubber seal, and that works really well. That really does make a big difference. So the actual membrane itself, you can see I've made it, I didn't make it too tight. I didn't want it spring tight, but I equally didn't want big creases in. So I kind of gave it a little bit of slack. And the way that it's installed is there's a silicone seal round, tube silicone to seal it in. And then I made these battens, drilled oversized holes so that the screw doesn't catch on the batten, cup screws, and clamped. I just did an absolute ton of screws in it, as you can see. It's peppered with them. But I wanted to make sure that the actual membrane was being clamped between the rebate and the batten. So it was being compressed along its entire length rather than just screws holding it. Because I figured as a pressure pulled, having a pressure pulling against a full flat area, it's unlikely to tear. If it's just pulling on the size of a screw, you're going to start getting rips in it. But that seems to work really well. I'd recommend that as a a way of doing it. I mean, this actual framework, these are superfluous now. You don't need these. These are a complete waste of time. But all you really basically need to do is have a routed rebate in your frame. So that's a really nice, easy frame to make. And the reason I use beech is because I had a load of it kicking about, and it's pretty rigid, and it was quite dense. And at the time when I was expecting to be doing the seals directly in the beech, I thought being a dense hardwood, the likelihood of it seeping air would be lower. But evidently that didn't work out. So once you're actually in the membrane press, we've got this top, it's just hinged along the back, and all I've got is maybe a dozen butt hinges across the back there. Just put loads of hinges because I wanted to make sure I got a really good, I didn't want kind of gaps between the hinges, so they're spaced about every 150 mil, 6 inches, to make sure there's not enough room for anything to flex. And then I'll just grab an Allen key, and I can show you what this baseboard is. All right, here we go. I've got an Allen key here, and I can just use that to put in one of these holes, so I can pick this board up because it's tight in there. There we go. So if you can see this board here, this is how the air gets evacuated out. So this base is a torsion box, and then in the center, I've got the air outlet. And then what I did was I machined this. Now, I did this on the CNC, obviously, like a bullseye going out, and then I drilled through. Now, there's different ways you can do this. Most people who use a bag would have this kind of this face up. And allow it to, I just wanted the holes because you can find on some especially thinner veneers, this telegraphs through and you can see these channels after it dries. So this way I've got a nice smooth flat surface. The other thing I did with this is sprayed both sides with a lacquer, and then it has been really well waxed so that glue doesn't stick to it. Obviously you don't want what you're veneering sticking to your platen sort of thing. So yeah, so this is really just a way of distributing that airflow and making sure that the air that's getting drawn out gets drawn from all corners of the membrane. And thus far, I've not needed to use breather membrane. So what you normally do in a bag, you'd have this kind of flexible stuff, looks like kind of nylon wadding, and you'd put it over the top to allow the air to evacuate. But I think the air pattern is enough that it works. Now, if you didn't have a CNC, you could just as easily do this by getting a track saw and, you know, going maybe 3-4 mil deep, doing a whole load of kerf cuts in this board and then just drilling through at some of the intersections, and that would work perfectly well. I say I did it on the CNC because I've got a CNC and it makes it easy. So this is the actual base. Now, it's really important with a press like this to make sure that the base is absolutely flat, or at least as flat as you can possibly get it. Because essentially when you're veneering, you're forming multiple laminations, and if there is a curve in the bed, that curve's going to be laminated into whatever product you're making. So, you know, if you veneer something bent, it's going to end up staying bent. So it's really important to keep this flat. And so the way I did that was made a torsion box, which if you watch woodworking on YouTube, which you obviously do, you'd have seen absolutely tons of them, no point going through that. The only other thing I did as well is between the torsion box, I drilled some holes from underneath and I filled them with expanding foam. And the idea of that was just to try and make it a bit more rigid and prevent cupping over time in the gaps between the ribs, because I really didn't want to have to redo it. So yeah, so it's just a torsion box filled with expanding foam just to create a bit of pressure. And as you can see, I've got more pond liner veneered onto the top of this. Now, if you were to use a non-porous board, you wouldn't need to do that. But I used a sheet of MDF for the top of my torsion box because, again, I was using up a load of scrap. And so I had to have something to create the seal. And so that's why I've got that pond liner. Yeah, I would recommend that you don't do that. You get something like a melamine-faced MDF or a melamine-faced chipboard, something like that. And, you know, just use that instead because it saves a whole step. And, you know, getting this nice and flat and getting all the creases out of it was quite a lot of work. So yeah, you can see now that goes there, and once this goes down, this again is just 18mm thick MDF, goes onto there. So as this lid comes down, it will form a seal onto here. So what I'll do is I'll show you quickly it forming a pressure. Let's put something inside so you can see it. It makes it easier to visualize. So here's a bit of MDF that's veneered in oak. Obviously it's already veneered, but it'll just give you an idea. So if I pull this down, I've just got this little toggle on the front to stop the front sliding over. I don't think I actually needed it, but again, put it in there. And let's just put a couple of these clips on. And we'll get the pump turned on. I think I need to plug it in actually. Right, so I've got a little remote control here just so I'd have to go over to the plug and we'll turn it on. I'm not sure if you can hear that starting up, but you can already see it sucking the air out. And you can see this is the panel, and you can see that fairly quick. So I'm saying that's only an 8 cubic meter an hour pump, and that evacuates the air out of here, you know, very, very quickly. And let me just try and bring you in here to, I don't know if you can see around the edges here, we've got a bit of a lip. And this is where the rubber seal is. So the rubber seal is directly onto the membrane. I'm not trying to seal the frame. We're using the membrane itself to seal. And the advantage with that is obviously the membrane is flexible. And so it pulls really nicely down. And you haven't got to worry about, you know, trying to make sure that you're not getting any bows. You know, if you had a nice rigid steel frame, that would be less of a concern. But yeah, that works really well. So then I'll show you a few other little features of this. So the actual unit itself is on three legs, and they're just boxes made out of some 25mm MDF. Again, you can make them out of pretty much whatever you like. It just happened I had that and I was using up what I had. And these feet on it are the Hafele Hayfully, whichever you prefer, heavy duty, wide feet levelers. And now having adjustable levelable feet on it's really important because, as I was saying, you need to try and get this absolutely as flat as you possibly can. So being able to adjust both ends and centre to take out any sag, really important. The other thing that I've got here is it's got a big drawer underneath, and that's got some various veneering supplies in it, things like the glue rollers, and my UF resin lives in here, scales for measuring out glue, just kind of anything I might need when I'm veneering. And I've also got just a cheap cooker timer. So if I'm veneering something, I know my times for the UF resin to go. I know if I've got it in, I need to put it on 40 minutes at this temperature, turn it around 40 minutes. And when I can get on with some other work then, and when I hear a ding, I know that it's ready to come out. But yeah, you can see this here. Now, the pressure that this is getting to is around 25 inches of mercury, which is about an 85% vacuum. As far as I can tell from what I've read up, that's ample good enough to be a good enough vacuum to get a good press. And, you know, I've used this a lot now, done a lot of veneering with this, and I've never had any problems. It gives a really nice tight glue line. So I think if you're getting over 20, generally, you're not having any issues really. And you can kind of see that's largely how it works. So it's quite a simple thing really. To get the actual press, this is let's see if that's in camera shot, but that's the actual pump itself. Let's see if that's in shot a second. Yeah, it is. So the press itself is an Air Press Developments one. That's popular in the UK. Makes no difference which one you use, I don't think. And I just have the hose go into a little threaded insert that I epoxied in with some araldite to get a good seal. And then I brought the base sheet all the way over. I say I don't think I made this easier, as easy as it could have been because it was just using up bits I had. But the principles worked really well, and the next one that we make is going to be a lot more refined, hopefully. So yeah, hopefully someone found that useful because I really was looking for trying to find, information on building my own veneer press, and I couldn't find an awful lot out there beyond the kits, which in themselves are, a couple of £1,000. So it's quite an expensive endeavour. I mean, if you've got bits of MDF and stuff left, you can make this for nearly nothing. I think if I had to buy all the MDF in it, buy the beach, buy everything that's here, I'm probably in 500 quid if I had to purchase everything. But, it's still, really small amount of money compared to actually buying a proper press. And you can make it to a size that works for you. So most of these presses would be wider. And as much as I'd like a wider one, I've got limited space and I can't, give up that much space, that wide press. So this has worked out perfectly for my needs, really. I've had one job that wouldn't fit in it, which were the veneered doors that I showed you the other week in the bag. But other than that, everything's fitted in okay. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I say, if anyone's got any questions about it at all, feel free to pop them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer everything I can. It's just a good project, and it really opens up a lot of more avenues for woodworking when you can veneer your own products, especially the real high-end work. Being able to use kind of more expensive veneers and grain match and do book matches and slip matches through cabinets and continuous grain through cabinets opens up a massive amount of new design options. So for anyone who's kind of got a cabinet making workshop and wants to kind of progress into higher end work, I think having a veneer press really gives you an option of doing that and is an awful lot easier to use than using the bags. So I say I've got little switches there, and it holds the vacuum for absolutely ages. We'll undo these clips. I think I bought these little clips from AliExpress. I think they were maybe like a tenner for a pack of 10 or something like that. So, the clips are really inexpensive. I did wonder whether I needed bigger, more heavy duty ones, but even with all them clips undone, you can see how well that's vacuumed down still. You won't lift it. You've got to let the air escape. You could put a release valve in. I tend to just pull this out here, which works as same as a release valve. It just lets the air go back. And then you can open this back up again. But yeah, just a really handy thing to have, and not a massively complicated project to make, and certainly something that's very expensive to buy but quite inexpensive to make. So hopefully that was useful, and any questions, fire away. Thanks very much.